Hi, today I'm going to review 1971, Never a Dull Moment by David Hepworth. And I've actually got this book on my Kindle, but I was looking through the hardback copy of it in Waterstones a couple of days ago, and a chap in a business suit stopped by my table and said, That's a really great book. And we had a little bit of a chat about David Hepworth's writing. And I recommended his podcast, Word in Your Ear, to this chap. And David Hepworth's writing really is a joy. He he's probably my favorite writers on the music scene, and I've read all his books and I've really enjoyed them. We previously reviewed his fabulous creation about albums, and this book is about the year 1971, which he asserts is one of the most significant musically ever. And the book starts on New Year's Day of 1970 with Paul McCartney issuing a writ in the High Court to have the Beatles wound up. So, what a start to a book. And then the next day is the start of 1971. So, right away, you know it's a significant year. So, just to quote, this book is a journey through the past to discover what happened that year, in what order, why it did, how the changes on the surface were responding to huge seismic changes underground, how it shaped and was shaped by a few hundred people who were in their mid-20s at the time, and why the music of 1971 still rings so clearly almost 50 years later. It's also, to a certain extent, about the world out of which that music emerged. It's a book about sex, drugs, hair, hot pants, taxes, technology, class, race, gender, and foolishness, as well as Grammy Awards. And David Hepworth puts all those things together in a very, very engaging way. He will take a fact about some change in the recording technology or whatever and put it into context with what was happening and why it was important. And he always makes it interesting. Um, he really is a terrific writer, which is very important. So one of the albums that he discusses is Tapestry by Carole King. And Carole King, up to that time, had been best known as one half of Goffin and King writing partnership, who were one of the partnerships in the Brill Building in New York that produced such fantastic pop material in the late 50s and early 60s. And uh, best known for Will You Love Me Tomorrow, Going Back, songs like those fantastic uh, um, pop songs, which are still really, really great songs to listen to. Anyway, David Hepworth describes how a photographer comes round to her place. She's moved out onto the West Coast and to take a picture for an album that was going to be made. And she wasn't dressed glamorously or whatever. She was wearing like a pullover. But he noticed she had a cat, and he puts the cat uh, on a piece of furniture and frames the photograph. And she's working on a tapestry. She goes into the studio, and 2 weeks after the photo was taken, the album Tapestry is released, which sells 25 million copies. So, really amazing from on so many different levels. The speed, uh, which in today's recording market is unheard of, and the uh, breakthrough of somebody who was not known for making records rather than writing them. So that sets the scene. Uh, he talks about um, some of the American artists like Carole King and also some of the British artists. And one of the British artists he talks about is Slade, and he talks about um, them going to gigs and venues all over the country, student unions and things like that, and traveling in a van. And what he says is scores of other British groups would have followed a similar trail in 1971, rattling around in the backs of ill-maintained Ford Transits, sleeping with the wheel arch as their pillow, relieving themselves in milk bottles, doing the NME crossword with a blunt guest house pencil, dreaming of a cold wimpy and chips, probing for each other's personal weak spots and exploiting them without mercy, and often risking life and limb by putting themselves in the hands of a driver who had taken a few drinks and didn't wear a seatbelt. The British folk rock group Fairport Convention had been involved in an accident in May which had fatalities. So that it kind of sets the scene of um, groups going all over the country. And um, the promoters who put some of these tours together obviously didn't possess a map, because quite often they would send the group up to Glasgow, then Southampton, then Newcastle, then Birmingham. You know, they always seem to choose places that were the furthest possible apart on successive days. Another artist that he discusses is David Bowie, and he went off to America almost on a private visit. It was sponsored by a record company, but he wasn't allowed to work due to musicians' union rules. But he started in New York, and then he went through the Midwest, Minneapolis, Chicago, etc., and ended up on the coast in LA. And in every place, he kind of told a different story. He reinvented himself till the final reinvention in LA became the David Bowie we know now, and led almost directly to Ziggy Stardust, which was his breakthrough, and then subsequently um, all the other things he did. Really interesting uh, insight into his career, which at the time was stagnant. So the book takes each month and has usually an album or a particular band associated with each month, and then discusses other things around it. As I say, David Hepworth writes in a most engaging way. He always keeps you absolutely rooted in the story, and the overall effect is a terrifically engaging book. And I look forward to his next work, which should be coming out shortly.